Are Poland and Ukraine friends again? For 3 weeks, Zelenskyy and Nawrocki played the silent game, and the scandal with the Order of the White Eagle escalated to the point where the award was sent back via Nova Poshta. Absurd? Completely. And suddenly a summit in Ankara, they're seen at the same table having a calm conversation as if nothing ever happened. They say the tension has evaporated. Is this a real reconciliation or just a convenient image ahead of the most painful date in Polish history? What was actually said in their tête-à-tête and who broke the silence first? All this and more in the upcoming segment. Like and subscribe. It all started quite ordinarily with an award. Karol Nawrocki announced on X that he was stripping Volodymyr Zelenskyy of the Order of the White Eagle. The reason was the Ukrainian side's decision to name one of its units after the heroes of the UPA. In Warsaw, this was seen as a direct blow to the memory of the victims of the Volyn tragedy. Ukraine's response was concise. No public disputes or comments. The award was simply returned by mail. After that, there were almost 3 weeks of complete silence between the countries, which share a common enemy. And then, over dinner before the NATO summit in Ankara, the ice finally broke. Nawrocki shared that he had a conversation with Zelenskyy. According to him, dialogue between neighbors who share a common enemy in the form of Russia is natural, despite all bilateral differences. However, he immediately made things clear. Historical grievances have not disappeared. Poland, as before, does not accept the honoring of UPA fighters, whom it considers responsible for the deaths of 120,000 Poles. On the Ukrainian side, presidential advisor Dmytro Litvin confirmed that the conversation took place. It was brief, but the leaders agreed to try to find time for a full-fledged meeting. So for now, what we see is not so much reconciliation as a cautious step towards each other. Both sides acknowledge the need for dialogue without giving up their fundamental positions. Is this true peace? The question remains open. The head of the president's office, Kirill Budanov, warned in an interview with RBC Ukraine the peak of tension is still ahead. Most likely it will occur this week, as July 11th marks the anniversary of the Volyn tragedy. Budanov does not rule out new escalatory steps from the Polish side, but he expresses hope that after the peak of the conflict, the expected de-escalation will eventually come. The situation was most aptly summed up by Poland's foreign minister Radosław Sikorski. He noted that the Russians are clearly enjoying how successfully they have managed to pit Poles and Ukrainians against each other through provocations. History cannot be rewritten and the victims cannot be brought back. But instead of tearing each other apart, it is worth seeking a path to reconciliation for the sake of a shared future. It is telling that this year, for the first time in 23 years, there will be no joint commemoration ceremony. The events will be held separately in Chełm and Warsaw. Therefore, the dinner in Ankara is more of a signal of readiness for dialogue than the conclusion of the story. It seems the leaders agreed not to let the past completely destroy the future, precisely at a moment when it would be most inopportune. After all, disputes among NATO allies are nothing new. Just look at what the alliance has faced ahead of previous summits.
In January, after the US carried out a brilliant operation to abduct Venezuelan President Maduro, the Trump administration set its sights on a NATO ally, Denmark. The US wanted to acquire Greenland. At the same time, in his speeches and statements that Denmark should sell the island, the US president did not hold back. He spoke about an economic blockade, the use of military force, and insisted that Greenland would be under the American flag no matter what.
We are going to take action regarding Greenland, whether they like it or not.
8 European countries came to Greenland's defense and issued a statement against the annexation of the island. In response, the United States raised tariffs. Europe, in turn, suspended the implementation of the trade agreement with Washington. But after lengthy consultations with the Europeans and criticism within the country, even from fellow Republicans, Trump backed down. The agreement was extended, but all of this affected unity, including within NATO.
I have enormous respect for the people of Greenland and just as much respect for the people of Denmark. But every NATO ally is obliged to be able to defend its own territory.
Within the year between summits, Trump had yet another reason to take offense at NATO.
Even 25 years ago I said that NATO is a paper tiger. And most importantly, we will come to their aid, but they will never come to ours.
8th of February, 2026. The US, together with Israel, launches an operation against Iran and promises a swift overthrow of the regime. But the war dragged on for weeks and months, and not only did the alliance countries ignore the call for unity, they also criticized the operation.
NATO is not an alliance for interventions, and therefore NATO is not involved here at all. I stated my opinion about this war from the very beginning, and nothing has changed.
Emmanuel Macron called the war a violation of international law. But in the end, having obligations to the Gulf countries, he deployed Rafale fighter jets, air defense systems, and sent an aircraft carrier there.
I gave the order for the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle, its air group, and the escort frigates to set course for the Mediterranean Sea.
Trump's behavior outraged the partners. The conflict with European leaders was escalating, but what saved NATO from a complete split was the Europeans' decision to still grant access to their bases. In particular, London allowed the Americans to defend allies and Israel from the Chagos Islands. Eventually, the Trump administration compiled a so-called list of disobedient and obedient NATO allies, who were to be punished for refusing to support the US war in Iran. And at the top of the short list, without a doubt, was Spain, the only country that never allowed American fighter jets to fly through its airspace. Overall, the operation in Iran only highlighted the lack of unity within NATO. The allies were outraged that Trump had not warned them about the invasion, but it later became clear that was his plan all along.
You see, when we acted very decisively and didn't tell anyone about it, because we wanted to preserve the element of surprise. Who knows about suddenness better than Japan? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor?
Trump's chaotic actions and statements, even more than Russian aggression, pushed Europeans to realize that the US will distance itself sooner or later. Moscow sees this as well. Over the past year, Russian drones have entered both Poland and Romania. There was also unrest in the airspace of the Baltic countries. However, the US did not see this as an escalation, or at least did not state so publicly. But in the end, Washington did warn Warsaw about the risk of Russian provocations on their territory in the coming months. Satellite images show that Russia has increased its military presence along the border with Finland and other EU countries, has deployed an intercontinental missile and nuclear weapons in Belarus. The Baltic countries understand the threat of invasion, spend more on defense than the NATO standard, and are strengthening their borders. Berlin, the economic leader of the EU, is also in a hurry. It plans to reach the mark of 3.5% of GDP for defense within just 3 years, which is well ahead of the deadlines agreed at the summit in The Hague.
NATO must become more European in order to remain transatlantic. In recent years, we have done too little for our own security. Now we are making up for it.
And before meeting in Ankara, some NATO partners met in France at the Group of Seven summit, where they were already demonstrating unity. Trump even welcomed the allies' achievements in defense production and supported the joint declaration in support of Ukraine, and he did not hide his interest in having Europe buy American weapons. The main difference now is that the alliance is not shaken by decisions from a leader across the ocean, but by quarrels between neighbors. However, the conclusion is the same. NATO's unity relies on the ability to reach agreements. While Kyiv and Warsaw are searching for a compromise, the summit in Ankara has already produced concrete results. On July 8th, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte announced the declaration. 70 billion euros in military support for Ukraine annually in 2026 and 2027, totaling 140 billion euros. This is a record aid package for the entire period of the full-scale invasion. Against this backdrop, Zelenskyy made a statement regarding Trump. The American leader announced a conversation with Putin, noting that he supposedly wants to end the war. Whether these words reflect the Kremlin's real intentions is a big question. While some try to resolve the conflict over dinner, others are deciding the fate of billions and the war itself through phone calls. Whether this fragile dialogue will last until July 11th or if we should expect a new outburst of emotions on the anniversary of the Volyn tragedy, we will see in just a few days. History cannot be corrected with a social media post, just as an insult cannot be erased with a single dinner in the corridors of a summit. However, when the enemy is shared by both, even a brief one-on-one conversation carries tremendous weight. Will this step become the beginning of true reconciliation? We will keep following the story. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and see you in the next episodes.